Hello, and welcome to Secure Talk, a podcast where we explore the critical world of information security innovation and compliance. I'm your host, Justin Beals, founder and CEO of StrikeGraph. Together with our expert guests, we'll provide you tools and tips to help your business thrive in the rapidly evolving cybersecurity environment. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Secure Talk. This is Justin Beals, your host. I'm really pleased to be chatting with our guests today, two very deep experts in what we're going to discuss, and certainly luminaries in their field. Today's conversation is going to be a lot about HIPAA and implementation of certainly this law and privacy, security, and compliance broadly. Our guests today are Rebecca Harold. Rebecca has over 35 years of information privacy, security, and compliance expertise. She is the CEO of Privacy Professor and is a partner for Privacy and Security Brainiacs, which is a SaaS solution founded in 2021 with her son, Noah. Rebecca has published 24 different books on security, privacy, and compliance over her career. We're also joined today by Kevin Beaver. So Kevin is an independent information security consultant, writer, and professional speaker, as well as an expert witness with Atlanta, Georgia-based Principal Logic, LLC. Kevin has authored or co-authored 12 different information security books, including Hacking for Dummies, and one of the books that we're going to be talking about today, the book that I got to read, which is The Practical Guide to HIPAA, Privacy, and Security Compliance. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin and Rebecca.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're really glad for you all to join us. I think that I certainly talk about this particular type of issue, HIPAA compliance, a lot in my work. And I find it interesting because sometimes I'll categorize security compliance into two different realms. One is third-party risk management, where I'm a vendor and I'm trying to win a deal. One is regulatory, right? And both can keep people from operating organizations in the places that they want to play. So they are critical accomplishments for organizations. I loved reading the book. I highly recommend it to any team that is considering implementing HIPAA. We're actually in the process ourselves of HIPAA compliance. And the book was an incredible guide to the real, as you say in the title, practical work of getting it implemented. So, Rebecca, I wanted to start with you. Perhaps we'll let you field this question first. It's now been over 25 years since HIPAA was initially passed. And I'm curious how you feel about that legislation and our commitment in the United States to patient healthcare.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for liking our book. I'm sure Kevin and I both appreciate that very much. And yes, HIPAA was passed in 1996, but the actual privacy rules supporting the high-level goals of the original regulation went into effect in 2003. The security rule went into effect in 2005. And actually, it was really forward-looking when it passed. The privacy rule has many of the forerunners of what's in other privacy regulations worldwide, such as GDPR. For instance, HIPAA gives individuals rights to access their PHI. It allows them to get an accounting of disclosures, obtain copies of their PHI, which is a type of personal data, right? Like GDPR talks about correcting their PHI, yep. And that's protected health information for your listeners who may not know what that is. Getting consent to use it and share it and so on, in addition to providing what was generally the first private industry comprehensive regulation in the U.S. So it really was a groundbreaker with regard to that. And over the years, HIPAA has been updated several times, most recently in April of this year. It was a big mistake, in my view, based on hindsight, that no meaningful penalties or sanctions were applied in the early years. And the reason was quite good. It was to give the organizations who were just learning about HIPAA a chance to get into compliance without being penalized. But giving them the benefit of the doubt, if you will. But the majority of covered entities, or CEs for short, simply interpreted that if there was no actual penalty given for HIPAA noncompliance, then they wouldn't face any consequences for noncompliance, which made most of the CEs and their business associates, when they became more involved, the perception that they didn't have to really use it because there would be no penalties. The actual resolution agreement started in 2008, so there was quite a gap there. So I guess that's just a few starting thoughts about that. I guess, Kevin, you probably have a few more to add to that.
Yeah, I would say, Rebecca, building on what you said, I'm a bit jaded. There's something that I observed about HIPAA early on, and in the mid to late 2000s, shortly after the security rule was passed, and I was, generating some work in that area. And obviously our book had just come out. Everyone in the industry was talking about compliance. They said that they were compliant. They would, push a lot of paperwork on you, including their notice of privacy practices. But the interesting thing is that everywhere I went and still go as a patient, and in many cases, a lot of the things that I saw with my healthcare clients it's smoke and mirrors. Dare I say that? Again, here's our notice of privacy practices. This is how we do HIPAA, and we're not going to do anything else because there's no teeth and we don't have any incentive. It's interesting. Many organizations assume that they're compliant until it's shown that they're not, and they end up on the HIPAA wall of shame. But I think overall the term compliance, especially in regard to HIPAA, is often just a facade. And I'm not just seeing this in smaller providers. I'm talking about mid-sized clinics and hospitals and even very large organizations operating in the healthcare industry that are considered covered entities. It's a widespread problem, especially early on, but I'm still seeing that because I think people just aren't getting the screws tightened down quite enough to feel the pain.
Can I make a quick comment about that? Because I've seen that too, but I have also seen organizations that were happy to have it because their security and privacy folks, mainly their security folks, they were not able to get the funding they needed until they had HIPAA. And so, I have seen them improve their security and privacy very much during that time. But I've also seen, just this past year, I saw a cancer research doctor who has 25 employees who had never done anything for HIPAA compliance. And he contacted me because he was getting questions from his patients who wanted to fulfill their rights under HIPAA. And so he thought that he could get into compliance with, wait for it, $200 paying me to get him into full compliance and be his ongoing remote privacy and security officer. He thought that's all that he should have to pay. And it's like, sorry.
Oh my goodness. It's that mindset. It's so interesting, Rebecca, that you said that. It's funny. It's not really funny, but I've been going through a terrible health situation over the past 5 years, seeing over a dozen different doctors, trying to get to the bottom of many symptoms I've been experiencing most of my life. I was meeting with a neurosurgeon just a couple of weeks ago. We were going over my MRI, and I asked if it would be okay to video record the conversation and what was being pointed out on my imaging. And this neurosurgeon was quick to point out over to the little poster on the wall next to the unlocked computer that was hanging there. The poster talked about this area being a no phone zone, and no pictures, no video were allowed. And it was literally me, my son, the neurosurgeon, and the neurosurgeon's assistant. And I was told that I couldn't do that because of HIPAA. And I suppose I would have exposed my own PHI to myself or something. I don't know. But this is just one of many examples I've seen over the past couple of decades where everyone is quick to talk about HIPAA. They say, well, we can't do it because of HIPAA, but yet their networks are absolutely wide open. Their physical security is not good, and so on. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is what it is. And kind of getting back to what you're saying in terms of getting buy-in, the IT and security and privacy professionals, in many cases, they weren't getting that buy-in. And I saw that as well with my own clients, because oftentimes doctors at the top didn't want to spend money, or they wanted to spend $200 on becoming compliant, but it just doesn't work that way.
I love these examples of the mistakes in the way we even perceive the activity, because it happens a lot, right? To your point, Kevin, there's some mistakes that we make where things get super onerous, where we're misapplying, the law in a situation because it's convenient for us to try and simplify it. And we see that on security postures in a lot, right? Like, well, the standard or the law asks for this, and so I'm going to buy a tool that's going to solve the problem, right? To your point, Rebecca, they're like,
exactly.
if I just bring in an expert to talk to us about this a little bit, then obviously I've solved the problem, right? And that's another way of minimizing it. And I constantly tell people that this is going to change the fabric of your operations, both like day to day, like what you think about when you're doing your work, as well as how you envision the future of your organization. Yeah.
Everything.
Tell me, I think that one of the things you pointed out is that the government was a little slow to start putting teeth to this law. And it seems like we may have another situation like that. I'm just considering the parallel. We've been hearing about CMMC for Department of Defense contracts for a really long time. But everyone we talk to says that they're putting off requiring implementation. And it seems to be a patchwork type of situation. Or is that what we saw with HIPAA, where like one big hospital way leaned in and everyone else thought they were buying a document repository tool that solves the patient healthcare information issue?
I'll say that's absolutely what I'm seeing. It's just this patchwork of compliance, and one organization will do it this way, another organization will interpret it and do it this way, and it's just all over the map. And there's just it doesn't make sense. And I don't know why, because the HIPAA legislation is actually laid out quite nicely. Even the early on stuff that came out in the early 2000s, it's very simple to read. It's very clear in what's expected, but yet, there were some mistakes made early on, again, with the lack of enforcement, with the whole concept of addressability and whatnot. And I think that led to a lot of picking and choosing of what people were going to do or wanted to do in order to become quote unquote compliant. And here we are.
And Rebecca, you have a comprehensive attitude to rolling out these programs, I think, in the book, a broader approach, right?
Well, absolutely, because to what Kevin was just saying, I've heard that too. A lot of times clients who come to me, both covered entities and business associates, they'll say, well, which ones do we have to actually comply with, And it's like, you need to look at each of them and determine if it applies to your organization. Some of them are not optional. And then I get into, being addressable versus being required, because that messes up so many of them. So, I have to explain, addressable means that you have to look at what your business ecosystem is like, and you need to determine, do we have a risk with this particular aspect of handling protected health information? If you do, then you need to actually implement that requirement. If you don't, then you need to document why you don't. You can't just go on your merry way and say, we don't have to worry about it. No, you need to document it to show you've thought about it. And then you have to explain why. But an example of that would be like encryption. Encryption is addressable. And this is something I've run across for, 20 years with HIPAA, is that people think, that's optional. No, it is not optional. If you're sending PHI through the internet, that's risky. If you have PHI that's sitting on your server stored there, it's vulnerable. So that's when you need to look at, what you need to do. But yeah, this picking and choosing is something that you have to look at things comprehensively, like you said. And I think once you speak with someone who's actually at a high enough level to be responsible and accountable for HIPAA compliance, who understands that they need to incorporate this into their full security and privacy management programs and don't look at it as a separate add-on, then it helps them to realize where they can start plugging in the specifics of the requirements instead of just trying to do it all separately here, Try to do it just as weaving it into the fabric of your full security and privacy program.
Exactly. It's got to be integrated into your business. I mean, it's literally a business function, not unlike HR, finance, legal. It's got to be so interwoven within the business that it's just part of the culture. It's just part of how you operate. And one last thing I wanted to say about the whole addressable versus required. The thing is, even if you believe that something doesn't apply, that a risk doesn't exist, it probably does, and you just haven't looked hard enough to find it. That's what I'm seeing in my
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I like to tell people that we're working with around any of these standards or laws like HIPAA is that compliance is complex. And any solution that looks like a magic wand, you need to be a little careful with, because I think to your point, Kevin, it's not just that that it has impact to parts of the business. Parts of the business have ownership over this work that they don't know of, like the VP of HR. Certainly your IT manager will probably think, maybe I should encrypt this data.
Right.
But they need to understand they literally have a part to play and ownership in the work itself.
They really do. There's been a big assumption, and I remember talking and writing about this over 20 years ago. I often see this mindset of, well, the IT and security team is taking care of it. This is an IT thing. Oh, that's above my head. That's not for me. So I'm sure IT and security, they've got their arms around it and everything is good. But I can assure you that is not the case most of the time. These IT and security professionals, they need help. They need support. That they need not just the financial backing, but the political backing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also HIPAA is absolutely not all technology. I mean, HIPAA security rule has a whole administrative section that includes things that are human activities, operations that you have to establish, training and policies, procedures, and checking on things, It also has physical. I see so many organizations not even addressing physical. And it's like, yes, that is a HIPAA issue. And they're like, that's physical. That has nothing to do with HIPAA. No, you're wrong. Because if you can physically get to a server, then you have a risk there. If you can physically get to your phone, which you, for some reason, put your entire database of your patients on, that's a physical access problem, in addition to the technology that is also a problem. It's not an either or, it's an and type of problem. You have multiple risks involved, and they all go beyond just technology.
Absolutely. Justin, if I can chime in real quick on a quick anecdotal story. I was doing a security assessment for a very large and very well-known hospital. And part of that assessment was to do an internal review of their network environment. So I basically I found vulnerabilities on the network environment. I was able to get remote command prompt to basically have complete control over a server by just running some exploit software, a tool that I use called Metasploit. There were tons of network shares that had just absolute gobs of PHI scattered about the network. Well, I actually went on site, and I thought it was interesting. I went on site. I just wanted to do a quick physical security review, because a lot of the assessments that I do, I can do remotely. But for a hospital and something this important, I wanted to go on site. One of the very first things that I saw, I went and sat down in the lobby of the organization, and I'm looking over by some other vending machines and whatnot, and I see there's a network port on the wall, and literally an Ethernet port. So I thought, I wonder what that is. I wonder what I can do. And again, I'm in the lobby right across from the security desk where people check in, and there's 1,000 people coming and going. I go over there and I plug in and I pull up a chair. I had full access to the entire network, including the vulnerabilities that I was able to exploit from my testing computer that I'd already discovered. Full server access, network shares scattered about. It was very eye-opening. And so to Rebecca's point, physical security is absolutely huge. And make sure you check all those network ports, because they may just be live and they may just be exposing everything and you not even know it.
I'm really excited that you still carry around a laptop that can connect to Ethernet, Kevin. That's not so common these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think that especially the healthcare and data privacy space is changed a lot since 2019. As a matter of fact, I pulled a quote from the Seattle Times. I was wondering if y'all might respond to it. The quote is this: in December of 2023, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reported that the medical data of more than 88 million people was exposed in the first 10 months of 2023. The department also saw a 93% increase in large healthcare-related breaches reported to the agency between 2018 and 2022. That's a massive shift. That is enormous. And Rebecca, I'm just curious what you're seeing as an expert in this breach situation that the healthcare industry seems to be going through.
Oh, absolutely. Well, just think about it. There is a lot more data being created and being collected as a result of many, many more digital types of computing products, many of which are within the healthcare space. Medical devices didn't used to be computerized. Now, most medical devices are computerized. And so you have all these, you have telehealth, which is absolutely great. I mean, I'm here in Iowa, and telehealth was used and is still used primarily for rural areas of our state because the hospitals there and clinics have been closed down, but yet you still need to get health care. So you have a lot more devices. You have also a lot more business associates that are supporting things. Outsourcing is a big change. So once you outsource, now all of a sudden you have all these additional servers that are storing data, copies of data that you have. So now it's a preponderance of data. And then you have a lot more types of IoT devices that are just simply being used within your digital ecosystem that you might not be aware of. One of the things that I've done over the years is I've been happy to be a subject matter expert and researcher for the National Institute of Standards and Technology since 2009. And for 3 years, just the past 3-4 years, I've been part of the IoT cybersecurity development team. So I've had a chance to help co-write and author those standards for technical and non-standard. But those IoT devices, my goodness, those are collecting and sharing so much data. And then you add to that apps, which a lot of organizations don't think about. If you have an app on your phone, how many people read, first of all, what they're allowing that app to do on their phone? Many of them are sucking the data out of your phone and sharing it with others. And then how many people download something and they're like, ew, this isn't any fun. And then they go on and forget about it. That app is still active and it's still sharing data. So there's a lack of awareness for even where that health data is going. And it makes it so important for HIPAA, even if it doesn't explicitly say you need to have an inventory of all your PHI and know where you're collecting it, where you're storing it, where you're sending it to. You have to know that in order to be able to map the full data lifecycle so you can then identify where the risky areas are throughout the life cycle. And I've done that with a lot of organizations, and they are so surprised, often, almost always, when they see all of the different places where this data is located. And it's just interesting. I mean, I could go on and on about that because there's so many areas throughout just that data and where it's created. Now with AI, it's just, open the Pandora's box for having PHI being used to train over 100 different types of algorithms.
Tough, Kevin, because we're increasing the amount of data centralized in stores on more stores. We're manifolding the surface area that we need to secure exponentially, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca made some great points. I'll add a couple of things based on what I've experienced personally and what I'm seeing professionally. I think I don't know that the attacks are necessarily any different. You could say that the malware is more complicated. Maybe some of the threat vectors are more complex. The same stuff is still there and the same things are still happening. Therefore, the same risk outcomes are occurring. I think in many cases, there's a parallel to what we have in healthcare. We have better technology now. We have better imaging in healthcare. We have, I've had so much imaging over the past handful of years. CT angiogram is amazing technology. MRI, the resolution of that, especially if you have a good radiologist that knows what to look for. Even DMX and DDA, I believe, is the successor to that. All of this technology, we're actually seeing more stuff, and therefore it makes it seem like that more things are happening. I think it's been there all along. We're just getting better information and more information in that regard. But I'll also add that I think what we're seeing here is sort of the culmination of many bad decisions being made over and over throughout the years in the healthcare industry, the things that we've already mentioned. The interesting thing with security is that we reap what we sow. Neil Peart, the late drummer from the band Rush, one of my favorite bands, he wrote a line in one of their songs called Natural Science. He said, "Time after time, we lose sight of the way our causes can't see their effects." And I think that's what we're seeing in healthcare. There's a lot of lip service, so to speak, being given to HIPAA privacy and security compliance, but there's not as much substance as there needs to be.
Can I add just one point, though? There are some 0 days that are very significant. And I'll give you an example. I also do expert witness cases. And one of them that I did was so interesting because it targeted an organization that the folks had training about phishing and so on. But it did not have the red flags that the folks inside learned. So they fell for it. What it was doing was, it was back in around 2017 was when it actually happened. Usually these cases come up, years later. Kevin, you know that. But anyway, what happened was it was right in the same month that this new type of spoofing, impersonation of emails came through where everything looked good. I mean, because this was the first time that it was used. And so this organization lost, millions of dollars because somebody wired data and also gave the HR data to a criminal who truly passed the sniff test, if you will. It's like, well, yeah, because people did do it. So there are a few new things. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of organizations, especially when you do have a good security and privacy awareness program, and you're training them, and your employees truly want to do that. But then when they apply what they know and it doesn't apply to the new threats, then it's hard to defend against that.
It's hard to defend against something that's never happened. Yeah, look at 9/11. That's you could argue that was a good example. Great point.
And I think to both of y'all's perspective, something we talk a lot about is that this work is adversarial in nature, right? You have another group, an adversary like a sports situation that's always trying to, break down that security or retrieve that data. And you're never going to always win in an adversarial situation. There will be, wins and losses either side. And sometimes I think to your point about a 0 day, Rebecca, is that we do need to give ourselves some grace that, we have adversaries. This isn't always just a lack of trying that a breach can happen. You have a quote in your book, it's on page 38, from the Poneman Institute. In 2013, they had an annual patient and privacy data security study, and you quoted that the study found that the primary causes of breaches in 2013 were lost and stolen computing devices, 46%. The secondary were employee mistakes and unintentional actions, 42%. And then the next most common breach was those by third parties, let's say like a hacker, 42%. But since that study, especially in 2019, we've seen a dramatic shift in the amount of data that's being breached by third parties, right? It feels like, and please confirm or let me know if you think I'm wrong, that cybercrime is on the rise in healthcare.
Well, cybercrime is expanding for sure. So all those things you talked about, and I think the third parties is like the business associates too, because that 42% is up to around maybe 48% now for business associates who are actually the cause of HIPAA breaches. But just think about it, from the old saying, why do you rob banks? It's because that's where the money is. Well, why do you rob healthcare organizations of PHI? Because that's valuable. And what's a very effective way to hold up a hospital? Ransomware is something, and it always frustrates me because 35 years back when I started. But anyway, that was back when making backups and having multiple backups and having breach response and incident response plans so you could quickly get to those backups that were not connected to the network quickly. I don't see that being done now. And instead, a lot of organizations are just depending upon insurance to pay for the ransom. Yep. And I think that is a very bad practice, and it allows the crooks to go ahead and use that. Medical devices, we talked about, they're being attacked. IoT devices are being attacked, and cloud services. And not only that, the pathways where the data is passing through. Why do people still attach to unsecured Wi-Fi networks when they're sitting in a coffee shop or in the airport ready to board? And it's like, come on, don't do this, but they're doing it.
Or even worse, why do they leave their laptops unlocked and go off to the bathroom or outside to take a phone call when they're at Starbucks? I see that all the time.
Yes, that, Kevin. You know what? Why do people, I must look like I'm so dependable and honest because they're always asking me to look after their stuff.
Me too.
Me too. Don't ask me. I could be a crook.
Right,
you don't know.
Right.
One interesting aspect that Rebecca mentioned, and I'm curious, Kevin, your thoughts, is the value of the data. That's shifted a lot lately. Patient healthcare information is worth a lot of money.
It is. I don't know I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I know that even the Poneman Institute has assigned values to certain records and whatnot. Healthcare records are worth X amount of dollars for this and this and this. And I stopped paying attention to that kind of stuff because it's so hard to keep up with. And all I know is it's valuable and we need to protect it, and we need to do better get better at all of this. But yeah, there's a huge market for this type of information. Yeah. There's a really large demand for these things to sell on these black markets and however else it's being used to commit fraud, whether it be healthcare fraud, insurance fraud or IRS tax fraud, things like that. Going back to some of the stuff that Rebecca mentioned, I've always been a big believer of focusing on the basics of security. That is the 20% of the vulnerabilities that are creating 80% of the risk and thus the incidents and breaches and whatnot. And it's things like proper vulnerability and penetration testing. It's software patching. It's passwords, data backups. And another really big one that I see, something that I mentioned, it's basically inventorying PHI and understanding where it's located on the network so that you can properly protect it. And these basics, these core essentials of security, they've been around for decades and they're still being ignored in many cases. I've got a really good book here. It's called Security, Accuracy, and Privacy in Computer Systems, written by a gentleman named James Martin. It's got a lot of the stuff that the HIPAA security rule covers. I'll share just a couple of things from the table of contents. It talks about security exposures, computer errors, security and systems programs, who's responsible for security, auditors, legal controls. The interesting thing about this book is that it was published in 1973. Yeah. These issues have been around for how long? Over 50 years. These challenges, these concepts, these very things that we still struggle with. The answers have been in books like this, in books like the HIPAA book that Rebecca and I wrote, my book Hacking for Dummies. It's out there, so we have to get to the bottom of it. Why is it these things are not happening? And I think it's a human challenge. It's a political issues. It's cultural issues. It's the problem almost always comes with hair on top. And that's why I shaved my head. So no, it's a big challenge, and we need to get these things out there in the open and stop, trying to implement more technology and put more policies in place and bring in more regulations. We need to just do the stuff that we know that already needs to be done.
Mm.
Well, and if I could go to that healthcare value to that book, Kevin, in 1991, I created 92, I created the first security policies at Principal Financial Group. I used the military rainbow.
I remember that. Yep.
Because that's all that was there. But anyway, with regard to healthcare, so I think two other issues. Too many organizations now, and this is something just in the last few years, artificial intelligence, you can't go a day without seeing AI mentioned at least 30 times. But anyway, people are using, even people who have access to patient data are using that to train AI algorithms.
They are. Yep.
And that exposes PHI in so many ways, not only just because it's used in the algorithms and for creating biases and so on, but now that data is over here unsecured in that. And then second, throughout my entire career, marketing has always wanted to get a hold of every type of personal data that any organization has. I've seen it in all my clients. So when we talk about misusing PHI, have you, organizations who need to comply with HIPAA, have you given your marketing folks and sales folks training about what they can and can't use? Because I found too many that simply have not established what should be, as Kevin recalled it, the core security rules. And that's, do not use real personal data for marketing and for sales. So, if we could even get a hold of those things and get them reined in, that could really stop a lot of breaches.
Absolutely. Great point.
Rebecca, I'm going to now be guilty of saying the back when I was young comment, but I did work in AI, data science, machine learning. Back then we called it algorithmic programming a long, long time ago. And I think what you're reinforcing is that we have good answers for how to solve these problems, because even back then, Kevin and Rebecca, I was very curious about a couple of things when we would develop models, which was, one is, what's the life cycle of the data? So if we are taking in data, we're going to build a model, it's going to make predictions. Where is the data left? In the model itself? Are we finding it in other places? What's that impact? And then the other thing I worry about is accuracy, which I think is in your book, Kevin. And I complain all the time about AI companies that don't publish accuracy measures, on the things that they're predicting. We need to know the probability that you're right or wrong before you do that work. Well, I wanted to dig into one other topic. We touched on it briefly in the beginning, but I think it's really important for organizations that are thinking they're HIPAA compliant or trying to be HIPAA compliant or caught up in HIPAA as a business associate. But you state that there is a common myth that HIPAA compliance is about technology that can simply be bought and put into place and magically make a CE or a business associate or a subcontractor HIPAA compliant. This is the furthest thing from the truth, and any attempts at acquiring compliance in a box without applying an accompanying customization or thought are not only futile, but likely will leave your organization with huge compliance gaps. Maybe we'll start with you, Kevin. This is, I think, a really important statement for our field.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I wrote that or if Rebecca wrote that, but it's very true. One of the first articles that I ever wrote was called HIPAA Security Compliance Doesn't Come in a Box. That was back in 2001 or 2002, I believe. I wrote that article. And there was a belief back then, and it's still around, is that we can go buy all of this stuff, or we can hire a managed services provider, or we can bring in like someone like Rebecca for $200 and all of a sudden be compliant. And it just simply isn't true. It just doesn't work that way. We're talking about, fundamental business concepts that have to be changed, fundamental thought processes that have to be changed. the way that you work, the way that that you interact with patients and whatnot. All of that, it's all within the fabric of your business. It's not just an add-on thing here that we can just pull off the shelf or go buy from some vendor and we're magically compliant. It always gets me. Rebecca and I have talked about this in the past, where you see a lot of vendors out there. They claim that their solutions are HIPAA compliant, and some of them will even go as far as saying, if you buy our solution, you will be HIPAA compliant. And wow, that's really bold statement and really dangerous. But yeah, this is a very fundamental component or aspect of HIPAA that is misunderstood. It's misrepresented, and it's basically people just don't get it. And we've got to move beyond that mindset.
And I might add too, and in case some of you tuned in later, I'm not going to get you in compliance for $200.
No,
that was just a statement made earlier in the example. But anyway, as far as HIPAA at the core, and this is what I always explain not only to my clients but to my students who take my HIPAA courses, you have to look at the risk management requirements within HIPAA, because truly that is like the core of HIPAA. Mm-hmm. Because if you understand those, it's emphasizing that you need to determine where your risk exists around protected health information, how it's used and shared, and so on. Once you understand that, then you can start understanding better all these other things that radiate out of the risk management aspect. And also, risk assessments are a subset of risk management. So that's why you can't just go through as an audit checklist doing a risk assessment. They're two different things. And I think once organizations understand that, oh yeah, even though I have a friend, Joe, who also has to be HIPAA compliant, I can't just, use their results of their risk assessment and their HIPAA audit and apply it to my organization and be in compliance too, because the organizations are inherently different. No two organizations are the same. So organizations need to understand that. And once they do, I think then that will shift their thinking a little bit, so that they then start realizing, oh, well, then this means that our security policies, which most people or organizations have, although there's many that still don't, but most organizations have, they can say, oh, here's how we can apply this to HIPAA now, even though HIPAA might not say specifically something about multi-factor, authentication. We can actually use MFA to support our risk management program and mitigate the risk we identified within our risk assessment. So I think it takes a little bit of time that technology cannot be a substitute for, to get people to understand what they need to do. Technology does not do everything for you. Just one last thing here, but before we go on to your next question, it's really disturbed me greatly when ChatGPT all of a sudden started being used for everything from, chat bots and everything else, to see a security vendor releasing a HIPAA security risk assessment tool. And it actually said in the marketing, which brings to my other point, talk to your marketers before they make claims. But anyway, it said, you use ours and you don't even have to worry about doing anything for HIPAA. Use our HIPAA tool, our risk assessment, just plug it in, let it go, and your risk assessment is done. And I read that and I thought, holy cow, they are going to miss so much, or they're going to get so many things wrong. Yep. Don't believe those promises, folks.
No.
Well, Kevin and Rebecca, this has been a very fruitful conversation for me. I've really enjoyed it. I deeply appreciate your work in this space professionally. And I want to give another plug for your book, The Practical Guide to HIPAA Privacy and Security Compliance. I really enjoyed reading it. And I know that's weird, but of course, this is a professional concern we all have. But it was just, I am not a privacy and security expert. I'm a CEO at my firm, and it gave me a perspective on how to be sure that we're implementing it the right way. So thank you both for joining us today, and look forward to continuing this work together, build a better community in healthcare.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks so much. So nice speaking with both of you guys today.
Likewise.